Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth the people walk upon. We are the land. How do we sell our mother? How do we sell the star?
We certainly bid you the highest and most sincere form of peace and justice today. We hope that you are doing well. Hope that you are doing as well as you can do potentially. And we welcome you with great enthusiasm to today's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we are so excited. I know we say that every week because every week we are so excited, but we are especially excited today because we began what I call African Liberation Day week, the week leading up to African Liberation Day commemorations taking place all over the planet Earth. And today we're going to be talking about our theme for 2026. Our theme for African Liberation Day, all over Africa, Europe, all over the Americas this year, is Revolutionary Pan-Africanism Fights in Solidarity with Oppressed People Everywhere. Our struggle is one. Revolutionary Pan-Africanism fights in solidarity with oppressed people everywhere. Our struggle is one. And I have said this before and will continue to say it. African Liberation Day, to me, is an exciting time of year. It is an exciting time of year because it represents the struggle that we're engaged in, those of us who are revolutionary Pan Africanists. And that struggle is to unite African people everywhere we are on earth. And African Liberation Day we use as a tool to do that and as a symbol of the work that's taking place every day. And so what we will see this week is African Liberation Day commemorations all over Africa, from the southern tip all the way up north, east and west. And many of those commemorations will be using this very same theme, either organized directly by the All African People's Revolutionary Party or working in coalition or at least influenced to do so. And this is exactly what we strive to do with the work that we do, as well as in Europe and as well as across the Americas. So we have here where I am in Northern California, here in Miwok land, where I live, and in this part of the United Snakes of America, we are organizing our commemoration for this coming Saturday, May 23rd, and it will be in Oakland, California. And Shakura and I and the comrades from the Bay Area, as well as we're fortunate enough to have one of our leading cadres from the Sahel region in Africa, from Burkina Faso, but also she does a ton of work in Niger as well, here with us in the Bay Area. So all of us, yesterday, Friday night, we had an event with the African United Front, which is an organization that has a number of African organizations throughout the Bay Area. And we had a great event in Oakland Friday night talking about Malcolm X, because May 19th will be Malcolm's 101st birthday, where he, still it's his birthday, but he was born in 1925. So 2026 is 101 years since his born day. So that was a great event. And then yesterday, in Oakland every year they have what they call the Malcolm X Jazz Festival, music. But it was yesterday. I don't know. There's something really positive happening. I've been to many of those jazz festivals. We go there to pass out flyers for African Liberation Day, which is this coming Saturday, and a lot of people there. But the programming yesterday was a lot more political than what I remember from years past. They had Palestinian speakers. They had the minister from the Nation of Islam talking about Malcolm X. They had a number of things like that. They talked about the African United Front, of which the A-APRP is a member organization. We were able to have wonderful conversations. And I'll just say that the comrade from Burkina Faso, she mentioned that, her understanding of the United Snakes is primarily based on social media, right? They don't have television that goes there from here. English is not the language spoken in Burkina Faso. So, there isn't a lot of, and not a lot of people from this country go there. So she was talking yesterday. We were sitting around, Shakura as well, and another comrade here in Sacramento. And we were talking about and we were enjoying some of the best West African food. Oh my goodness. I wish I would have got 4 or 5 plates. But anyway, she was mentioning that she did not really know what to expect when she got here, and was excited to find out because, on social media, most of what you see are these FBI, CIA promoted propaganda campaigns that talk about we're not Africans, we're Native Americans. We can't stand Africans from the Caribbean. We can't stand Africans from Africa. They can't stand us. That's what you'll see if you'll log on to social media. And for most of us who do no research, then we believe that that's the dominant perspective that our people have. And that's the whole intent of it. And she wasn't believing it, but she was just wondering what it would be, and was she was so happy to see so many Africans yesterday wearing African clothes, hairstyles, messages talking about Africa, talking about Pan-Africanism. And this is the reason why this time of year is it's my favorite time of year. I mean, it always has been. It's 42 years of me organizing in this organization, and I look forward to it. And I really look forward to this program today, where we're going to be talking about our theme in practical terms. I mean, there are many ways we can talk about it, and certainly with our commemoration next week in Oakland and in many of the other commemorations, we will have representation of solidarity. I know for us, we have people coming to participate and give presentations from the Palestinian youth movement, from the American Indian movement, from El Partido de Raza Unida, from the Haiti Action Committee, Black Alliance for Peace, from the African United Front for the Bay Area I've mentioned, and from many other groups. And so that's really the manifestation of this question of solidarity with all of these struggles. We're inviting others like Gabriela and Anak Bayan from the Filipino community. You know, that's what this entire theme is about, that our struggle is one. And so today, we only have so much time. We wish we could break out our work with all of those communities I mentioned, but that's why you should come to African Liberation Day, because we will have more time to do that. But for this program, we're going to focus on solidarity with socialist Cuba, because that's very important, especially with the attacks against Cuba right now. That's extremely important. I mean, now these basticles are talking about they're going to indict Comrade Raul Castro on something, indict him on being a revolutionary, while they're a bunch of fake ass human beings, I guess. And, you know, we need to be staying right on top of what they are talking about with our comrades and our family in Cuba. You touch Cuba, you touch us. And that's the mentality we have to have. Get your grimy, filthy, white supremacist hands off of socialist Cuba. That's the best thing happening. Socialist Cuba is the best goddamn thing happening in the entire Western Hemisphere. There, we were talking yesterday. There is nothing of value happening in this country, just a bunch of bullshit that happens every day in this country, and have the nerve to make a threat against Cuba. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and we're glad you're here. This program is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, A-APRP. And our organization is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party with a base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, defined as one unified socialist Africa. There is no reason, with African Liberation Day commemorated, we organize it in over 24 cities around the world. There's no reason why you should leave this next week and have no understanding of what Pan-Africanism is. If you want to know, you can find the answer everywhere during African Liberation Day week. So we encourage you to seek it out. And even if you're not mobile, we have an international webcast next Sunday, which will give you information about that at the end of this hour. But our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And this program is sponsored each Sunday, although we won't have a program next Sunday because we want to encourage you to participate in the African Liberation Day webcast. But every Sunday we're here, and we do it with myself, Ajamu, and Dr. Shakura Umi, who will start us off. So I'll hand it over to Shakura.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thanks, Baba Jamu. Appreciate you too. Yeah, so I just wanted to echo what Baba Jamu said and just start by saying that we have no choice, you all. We must stand with Cuba and we must make sure that they know how important they are to us. I do think that in times like this, it's really important to remember just how valuable Cuba has been for us, and to remember how they have pretty much laid out the land for us in terms of what we are fighting for. You have to remember that the reason that we need to stand with Cuba is because they have been able to accomplish something that the oppressor is very comfortable telling you is not possible. the oppressor is very, very comfortable telling you that socialism doesn't work. And the oppressor is very comfortable telling you that it's never worked. And I just find that very hard to believe. If something has never worked, then why have you worked for over 60 years to dismantle it and to take it down? And so this is like the age of the blockade of being 60 plus years, right? And so I just think we need to think about that and bring those two pieces together. If Cuba is such a failure, if it's such a disaster, then as Baba Jamu said several months ago, why are you working so hard to pick at it and to bother it? And my argument's exactly, why have you worked so hard to stop them from getting medicine, to stop them from getting resources, clothing, materials, food, supplies, if they're not working? They are working. And it terrifies you because socialism is a complete deconstruct of imperialism, colonialism, and capitalism. And so it's much easier for you to just tell people that those systems, that socialism doesn't work, but that's not true, especially based on the evidence. So this is why we need to stand with Cuba, because Cuba is literally an example showing us not only is it possible for them, but it's possible for all humanity that would like that type of life, that would like a life where they can actually be valued. So we just need to remember that solidarity and oppressed people, this is an ongoing act to continue to keep the oppressor's thumbs on top of us. The more effective they are at doing that, the less effective we are at pushing back, the less effective we are at considering the possibility of pushing back. The idea of even organizing to a lot of us is starting to become more and more progressive and more possible. And that terrifies the oppressor. You know, as Baba Jamu mentioned, we have the opportunity to engage with passing out flyers Friday night and Saturday. And what I noticed is I probably talked to maybe close to 40 people between Friday and Saturday night. And every time I brought up the African Liberation Day flyer, most people literally had the expression on their face that was relaxed. They didn't feel threatened or intimidated by me. And they also seemed to be kind of relieved that I was giving them this flyer. A lot of them were like, oh, okay. They weren't like, oh, okay. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll have to come out. And then I tried to, seal it with the close. And I said, I'll see you Saturday. And they're like, yeah, I'll see you. And so I know that I spoke to probably about 40 people. One person said no. And I don't even think she said no just to me. I think she said no because she doesn't like taking propaganda. And that's fine. But 1 out of 40, that's not bad. That's not a bad statistic. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think people are moving into a direction where they want to see change. They just don't really know how to go about doing it. And we understand that, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, we understand that the work study process is a very disciplined, high intense system, and many people won't be able to fall in line with that, and that's totally fine. But we do ask that people at least have an open mind to try. We do ask that people have an open mind to try, and if you are African, you should try, because if you don't do anything, especially trying with that, then you're not really in a position to critique what's happening. And more importantly, you are adding into the oppression that you're experiencing by not really taking the advocacy and the agency that you have to make that change that you so desperately seek, right? And so this idea of solidarity being an act of acting in conjunction with other entities that address these common oppressions, that's a very powerful way of saying you're complacent and you're not doing anything to push back against it, which is why there's that conjunction in place. This means that we need to have a very wide consciousness. And many of us, too many actually, are not really willing to work to develop that. This is why we said you should at least have an open mind to try work study. And if it's not work study with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, then maybe you start your own organization. This is why we keep saying that. You don't have to necessarily fall in line with somebody else's system or somebody else's practice. Maybe you can start your own thing. But we do encourage you to do something working towards justice, because then you would have the motivation to do it if you had started it. Or so we think, right? You'd probably be more inclined to follow through. You'd probably be more inclined to be consistent if it was something that you started. So those are not excuses. If you can't really find something that's working for you, then create your own and introduce people to your concept and see if they would be willing to try your situation and your organization. The unwillingness to develop an understanding is really a critical weapon that the imperialists are depending on, because it prevents us as organizers and resistant people, it prevents us from increasing our own capacity to be able to go forth and battle with intention, with efficacy, and with effectiveness against the same enemies that are trying to deconstruct, dismantle, and basically dehumanize humanity. And so this is why we have to really understand, like, not only how important this is, but this is also why we say this is bigger than us. This is also why we say, we want you to increase your political education, because if you're not in a position to understand the timelines, the history, the herstory, the theirstory of all the things that have happened, all the dates and the different ways that people have crossed paths and agreed on ideologically ideologies that have made them stronger, that's going to be very harmful, because you can't necessarily be equipped to understand how to physically defend yourself and how to physically use a weapon if you're not equipped to understand ideologically how to defend yourself, especially with that political education. Next slide, please. So that's really important to understand that, because we are at a crossroads here. We've always been at a crossroads, and this is the time where more and more people are starting to understand they're going to have to pick a side. And you really have to take responsibility if you are complaining about how things are, but you're not willing to change the norm. You're not willing to push against that. That's really going to be very problematic on your part, because ultimately we're going to see that, your pants are hanging down and you really had no intention to change things. What are some of the benefits of solidarity? Well, we first need to understand that when we eliminate one of the chief tools of our enemies, that allows us to keep, that enables us to keep being distracted. And so now we're fighting against one another instead of actually taking our energy out on what really needs to be deconstructed. And truthfully, when we fight against one another, this allows us to have no benefits while also giving those in power more opportunities to find ways to attack us, finding more loopholes, finding more gaps, finding more ways to create lies and stream them on social media, finding more ways for us to discount one another and really to discount ourselves. And as I prepare to hand it back to Baba Ajamu, I'll just share a very quick story. I already shared this before when I did my Cuba report backs earlier this year, but this story bears repeating. One of the last days that we were there on the island, we had the chance to go to the ICAP headquarters, and we were privileged with the ability to hear from some of the medical students who, as you know, are educated for free on the island. These particular students were Palestinian, and they shared with us some of the heartfelt, terrible stories that they had encountered. They talked to us about how two of them were still in school and they had maybe 2 semesters left. Two of them had already finished not only school and their coursework, but their residency, but they had nowhere to go. They could not go back home to Philistine. And so they felt grateful that the Cuban government said, this is your home. You can stay here as long as you like. But at the same time, it wasn't mutually exclusive of obviously the devastation and the sadness, because some of them hadn't talked to their families. They couldn't get in touch. They didn't know what was going on. And they didn't have the confidence or the abilities to get back to Philistine without fear of danger or death, right? And so they were just trying to figure out how to make their way out of no way. They talked about how a lot of them came to Cuba with no Spanish speaking skills, and they had developed it over time, figured out how to create their spaces, and figured out how to decide on their specialties based on what the needs of the Cuban people were. So they gave us an incredible panel. And at the end, we had, of course, the Q&A, and different organizers with our brigade asked questions. And I asked the question, we hope that you all understand. I introduced myself as a party member, and I said, we hope that you all understand that we are with you. We haven't forgot. We are with you. We are standing with you. We are stronger than ever. And it really, really tugged at my heart when the comrade said, I think my question was, what else can we be doing besides organizing to continue to make you feel like we're supporting you and we got your back? And the comrade said, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Don't stop. And if you see people who are not organizing, try to get them involved. And that meant so much to me, because he said, we follow you on social media. We know what you're doing, A-Rock. We know what you're doing, the party. We've heard of the party. We know what you're doing, Gabriella. We appreciate you, Black Alliance for Peace, for speaking out against what's happening in Palestine and Gaza. And so, like, I'm just saying, like, all of this is not for nothing, you all. And we were literally talking about solidarity, right? Better story to support how important this really is. And I would just argue that it was very humbling to hear the comrades say that, because it wasn't but 6 years ago when comrades from Black Lives Matter were getting messages from comrades in Philistine telling them how to navigate if they got tear gas in their faces, because unfortunately they were pretty experienced with that. And they were able to share those messages with Africans walking in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And so just to kind of see that come back full circle, it's very humbling to understand how important this work is. And I also think it's important for us to keep fighting. We also need to understand that the society is trained to make us focus just on ourselves. And this is why you have to remember no oppression Olympics. Because if you're not careful, the system will make you feel like your people and your problems are the only ones that exist. And that too is deterring us away from solidarity. We are stronger together. And that's why the theme for ALD could not be more perfect, because unfortunately, imperialism has messed all of us up. It has completely strifled through and terrorized our people. It has taken our land. It has violated our people sexually. It has harmed our children. It has bombed our resources and taken our materials. We have to fight back. And we cannot do that alone. And what's happening in Ireland, what's happening in Burkina Faso, what's happening in Turtle Island, it is all connected. And if you do not understand that, we strongly suggest you increase your political education, join an organization that is working for justice, or do some reading with the reading group of another organization so that you can learn. Because there's a lot to be taught here. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, asante sana, and thank you very much. And just to contextualize so that we can understand why, because like Shakur mentioned, there's so many social media campaigns, you all. And a lot of these campaigns, we study them very closely. A lot of these campaigns are not random, just, accidental, just coincidental things. These are coordinated campaigns. And the campaigns, I would suggest, I don't have the evidence today, but we continue to do the work. We will have it one day soon. I'm sure that they're coordinated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and these types of entities, because whose interest does it serve for oppressed people around the world to be disunited and be at each other's throats? It serves the interests of the people on top. And they want to maintain that interest. So if you go on social media, you will constantly see these references just among African people. I'm not African. I ain't no African. I'm Native American. I don't have anything to do with Africa. I don't have anything to do with Black people in America. You'll see that everywhere. And it's strange for someone like myself. I mentioned at the top of the program, we have the comrade sister here from West Africa who was working with us this weekend and will be, with us all week. And she was mentioning how that social media that I just mentioned is dominant. This is what people in Africa see, and that's by design. And it's very strange for someone like me who has traveled throughout Africa extensively, and so I know, like, the kind of things people say about the kind of things African people in this country say about Africa have little basis in reality, right? And first off, if you go somewhere as a tourist, then that's how you're going to be perceived. Like, we all know that. So I don't know why we even still have to have that kind of conversation. But my travels have not been as a tourist, and so as a result of that, I have very different experiences than people who describe their tour. I mean, if somebody came down the block where you live on a tour bus taking pictures of your house, you would look at them a certain way. So I mean, we shouldn't have to spend a lot of time explaining that. But by and large, if you go as a person on the ground, going to discover your culture, going to discover who you are as a people, then that's how you receive. That's always been my experience. All 11 different countries in Africa that I've been to. I've never had any type of different experience other than that, including just a couple of months ago when I was in Azania, or what you would probably call by the colonial name South Africa. And it's never been, no matter what the language people speak, none of that matters, because people understand that we are the same people. And that's why this slide is so important, because it asks the question, why do we even do the work that we do? Why do we do it? And the reason why is the entire wealth of the Western capitalist world results from the transatlantic slave trade. That is the system that enriched the United States of America and Europe. That's the system that did it. And the way it did it is that you got to ask the question. For 350 years, chattel slavery existed in the Western world. And if we don't know what chattel slavery is, that's the first thing you got to do is get it under. We don't have time today to, define everything, but we've done programs where we've talked extensively about the difference between historical slavery or serfdom and chattel slavery. I'll just tell you the primary difference is with slavery that existed before the transatlantic slave trade, which focused on Africa and bringing African people to the Western world. Before that system, slavery was a system of serfdom where you can't show me anywhere in the world. We've studied it extensively. I'd love to debate with anybody who thinks they have an argument, but you can't show us anywhere in the world where serfdom slavery existed, where people, would 90% of the people would earn their right to get out of slavery, and many of them were able to own property and actually become rich. That's slavery that existed in 198 countries around the world. Because these people today are, they're shifty. They'll confuse you if you don't know history. Well, everybody had slavery. They're constantly saying that today. And they're saying that because they know most of us don't know this history and don't know how to talk about it the way I'm talking about it right now. So that was the system that those clowns and buffoons are talking about. The transatlantic slavery had chattel slavery. And chattel slavery is where you were born into slavery, you died from slavery. You didn't get, there was no system in place. We understand some people were granted their freedom, but that was totally dependent upon the master, and that was not a widespread thing. The overwhelming majority of Africans who were brought into transatlantic slavery, they died in slavery. Their children were born into slavery. They died in slavery, and that was the system. And not only that, you were not permitted to own property. You were not permitted to do things to elevate yourself. And even for those few Africans who were granted freedom, they still, because of the racist laws in this country, they weren't permitted to do those things that you would have needed to been able to do to advance your individual situation. So it's important to understand the transatlantic slave trade produced proliferated the sugar, coffee, textile, cotton industries, and these industries made Europe and the US rich. That's what did it, because these industries allowed industry to boom in Europe, and that precipitated the industrialization period, which brought in mechanization and produced the capitalist system. This is the history they will never tell you about in school. None of us know this. Like, if I ask people all the time, I speak all over the world, and particularly if I'm doing it in Africa or in Europe or Canada or something, I always ask people, how did capitalism come about? It's the dominant economic system on the planet Earth. Where did it come from? I ask this question. I've asked it 1,000 times, and the answers I get are, well, it came from let's see what happened. People had ideas. They were ingenuous. These are progressive thinking people that say this, because this is what we've learned, and we don't study it outside of the realm of the capitalist system. So, of course, the system is going to tell us that it resulted from nothing but positive things. But the truth, the truth is the capitalist system resulted from the transatlantic slave trade that enslaved millions of African people. And you just have to ask the question. We worked free for 350 years. We picked cotton, sugarcane, hemp, coffee, textile. We did all that. Where did the wealth from that go? It didn't go to us. We weren't allowed to have it. Where did it go? It went to Europe, and it was used to help finance the development of European industry, the banking industry. And I have examples on the screen here. The banking industry, Barclays Bank in Britain, Wells Fargo, Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of America, all of these banks got rich, you all, by financing the slave ships, the slave plantations. You know, you buy property, y'all know how it works. You buy property, you pay a note. The banks finance these notes. You pay, if you own a house, you pay a note to some banking institution, or if you don't own anymore, you used to. And so that's the process. And so this is what happened, is that the banks got rich financing slave ships and slave plantations. That's why it is absolutely stupid. There's no other word for it. When these people are running around here today talking about, well, there's no evidence of slave ships. There's overwhelming evidence of slave ships. All you got to do is research the banks. That's what I did. I did that 25, 30 years ago. The banks have it archived because this is how they're not going to destroy the history that explains how they got to be the largest financial institutions in the history of human civilization. That history is documented. They just don't have to worry about us finding out because we don't read, we don't study anything. So it's all there. If you look for it, they're not even trying to hide it. It's there. They financed the slave ships. They financed our ancestors. The insurance industry proliferated. I have Aetna on the screen, but it applies to all of them. AIG, New York Life, all these insurance companies proliferated their profits by insuring these slave ships that were financed by the banks. You buy your house, you pay the mortgage company, you have to get an insurance company to insure it. You buy your car, you pay the financier that's financing it, you have to get an insurance company to insure it. This is what they did to our people, you all. This is why this country and Europe got rich. It had nothing to do whatsoever with them working hard. It had nothing to do with God blessing them more, them praying more. It had nothing to do with any of that. It had only to do with what I'm talking to you about. And I don't even understand why we would believe any of that anyway, because there is nobody on earth that prays harder than we do. I've been throughout Africa. I've seen people with rickets. They can't even control their bodies, are all contorted and twisted up. And these people have complete faith in God, even though their lives permit them to do nothing except be able to roll around on a the kind of thing you put heavy furniture on to roll it. That's what they do. Or if they can't even get that, they just sit on cardboard and do that. And I've talked to many of these folks. They're the most spiritually enriched people on earth, and they have nothing. So it has nothing to do with that. And all that is a lie that's been perpetuated against us for centuries so that we don't do anything to address this contradiction. That's it. So the reason why we say revolutionary Pan-Africanism and African identity, it's not about where we come from. I'm not an expert on that. Like people ask me all the time, where did you come from in Africa? I don't know. I've never done a deal because I'm not going to pay some European company or even an African company to tell me where, because I don't care what part of Africa I came from. I claim the whole continent because the only reason why you have African countries, 54 on the land base and another 4 islands around Africa, so 58 total. Only reason why you have that is because of colonialism. We didn't create Nigeria. We didn't create Kenya. We didn't create Senegal or Burkina Faso or Mali or Ethiopia or Morocco. We didn't have anything to do with creating any of that. And if you study Africa, you know, like in Ghana, you have the Akan people, and they're in Burkina Faso. They're to the north. They're in or to the east. They're in Cote d'Ivoire to the north. They're in Togo to the south because the colonizers didn't care about ethnic groups when they carved up the country for European exploitation. So that's what we're talking about. Africa to us has nothing to do with where we came from. It has everything to do with where we're going. The strength and unity of Africa is about where we're going. That's what we mean when we say revolutionary Pan-Africanism. It has nothing to do with, I mean, obviously that's a factor where we come from, but it's not rooted in that. It's not about where we came. It's not about African descent. It's about African ascent. That's what it's about. And the organization of our vast resources it's best not navigated through an political economic system that's organized, planned, and rooted in principles of justice. And that's why we say scientific socialism. I just explained to you, capitalism is the reason why we're in the situation we're in. So no logically thinking person could understand that and say that, well, that same system has to be the way we get out of this. Like, that's clearly not reality. That's not a serious position to have. It has to be something different. And so this is why we say this, and this is why we understand this, and this is more importantly why we work for this, because this is what we want to see happen. Now, as it relates to the solidarity, again, we could talk about a number of solidarities. And Shakura mentioned the Palestinian youth who were helping Black Lives Matter activists here. This is a real thing. There is literally an organization in this country called Asians for Black Lives. Asians for Black Lives. That is an organization. Look them up. I've done work with them. So we really sound silly when we sit around here in 2026 talking about, well, no, we don't have any allies. Nobody is there to support us. We really expose, for those of us that know, how little we know about what we're talking about. Because there is no African People for Asian Lives. There's no organization like that. None whatsoever. So this is we gotta we gotta understand this when we say solidarity, because people are convinced, our people are convinced that if we support the struggles of other people, that somehow means we're taking attention away from our people and what we need. And I can tell you, as someone who has done this work an awful long time, that couldn't be farther from the truth. It strengthens the work that we do for our people when we recognize the struggles of other people. It strengthens it. And I'd be willing to take those of you that believe that, or you know people that believe it, send them to me, please, because I'd be willing to sit down with them and talk about the work being done for African people. And I can guarantee you right now, they're not going to be able to produce more work than what I do and what we do, even though we do solidarity work. And I do a ton of solidarity work. Now, this weekend, I did the core work. We worked with nothing but African people all weekend. That's what we've done, hundreds of them. That's what we did. But I also have other work that I do. I do a ton of work now here where I live in Sacramento. There aren't a lot of large communities that are doing, things movement wise. So we have very limited, it's just this kind of town I live in. So we have very limited options that way. But obviously it's California. So there are tons of indigenous people, Latino people. So that's primarily where I do the bulk of my solidarity work. And I do a ton of solidarity work with indigenous communities. And what it's done is it's helped them understand our struggle. Because one of the things I've been able to do is bring a political education component. Even when I teach the self-defense classes on Thursday, that's primarily indigenous people that come. And so they've learned a lot about the African liberation movement. And this allows them to educate their families, many of them who have been strongly imbued with white supremacist views against the African people. They've been able to engage that struggle with their families. And that's the point, because when we move, we don't need to have them in our way. They're not causing the problem for us, and we're not causing the problem for them. So these types of bridges we can use can help us in that regard. And I just want to spend the rest of the time focusing in on Cuba, because Cuba is under serious attack. Here these basticles have cut off their oil, and that means it's not about just oil so you can drive a car. It's about heat, having heat and being able to cook. They've cut all that off from them. And they're doing that to attempt to starve the people in hopes that it'll turn them against the Cuban Revolution. That's why they're doing all this. That's why they have the economic blockade against Cuba that's been going on for 62 years, where no countries can trade with Cuba. Cuba has no ability to get medicines, to import food, to bring in spare parts for their machines, their cars, everything. They can't do that. They have to manifest that on their own. And this is, like Shakur said, this is an effort to destroy the revolution, a revolution that they will tell you, and a lot of us believe, cannot work but yet they do everything they can to sabotage it, including violence, which they've engaged in by coordination from the Central Intelligence Agency for the last 60 years against the Cuban Revolution. And we have done other workshops specifically on that question, so you should check them out. But the reason why we want to talk about Cuba in the remaining time is that there is not a single conscious African person in the US who should not see the importance of supporting Cuba. And I said conscious African. I'm not talking about these sellout coon type Africans. I'm not talking to them. I'm not talking to you because you're a grifter. You know, you have decided that you see a possibility of creating a brand for yourself and becoming, putting yourself in a position to be able to make money off of our suffering. You know, this is what we do, you all. We support our own people who exploit our suffering. I mean, I look at someone like Snoop Doggy Dogg. I mean, look at this clown. Like this person has made like people are upset at him because he uh, performed for Trump. What else would you expect someone like him to do? I don't know why you're surprised. If you're surprised, you just haven't been paying attention to this dude. I mean, think about it for a second. This guy, the reason why you know him is because he made a musical career exploiting the negative aspects of our day-to-day life living in the Los Angeles area. That's what all his music is about. And this is a life that he himself didn't even participate in. That's a fact. If you study this clown's history, all he did, him, Ice Cube, all these criminal thugs, all, and I say criminal thugs because they betray our people, not because they were out in the streets. That neither one of them were engaged in serious gang activity. Ice Cube, not at all. Maybe Snoop Dogg on a periphery level, but not seriously, he wasn't. Not seriously, he wasn't. And I know this because we've done our research. So they didn't even do that. And yet they sang about killing all these African people and disrespecting all these African women. And a lot of us listening bought that music, danced to it, sing to it. And then today, this man shows who he really is again for those who were too blind to see it when he was showing us in the 1990s. And we're like, well, what is he writing? Of course. He's a sellout. That's what he is. He's sacrificed any integrity and principle to stand up in a correct way for our people to make money. So of course he's going to do that. So any conscious African would understand that we have to support the Cuban Revolution. And since the Cuban Revolution came into existence in January 1959, Cuba has provided consistent and meaningful solidarity while asking little to nothing in return. And the first example we'll give you is the picture on the top left, Ernesto Che Guevara. And Ernesto Che Guevara went to, in the 1960s, the Congo became independent after years of brutal colonialism. The Congo is the most resource-rich area in all of Africa. And Africa is the most resource-rich area on the entire planet. You can take all the other continents combined, all the other 6 continents combined, and they don't have the resources that Africa has combined. You cannot have a cell phone without African minerals, columbite, tantalite for the internet, cobalt to charge your battery. You can't have your electric car without African lithium. You can't eat chocolate without African cocoa. You can't have electricity in most parts of the world without African uranium. This is an irrefutable fact, and I could go on and on about that. But the point is that the Congo is the richest mineral resource region. And at that time in 1960, you had the Cold War, and uranium is what you use to make nuclear power. And the US and the Soviet Union were fighting to build these nuclear weapons. And so they had to have access to the Congo. And Patrice Lumumba, when the Congo became independent, the first thing he said leading up to that is we're going to nationalize our resources, meaning we're going to use our vast resources to uplift the Congolese people and the people of Africa who were poor and got nothing from this exploitation that was taking place by these US and European corporations. So immediately they engaged in sabotage. 2 weeks after the Congo became independent, they pushed the soldiers to rebel, and it never got any better after that. And by January 1961, the CIA had instigated assassinating Patrice Lumumba and boiling his body in acid to eliminate the evidence, even though we pushed them so hard since then that CIA has had to admit it now that they did it. So that's not just our opinion. It was always correct. But the war engaged, and the Congo was so unstable that after that election that put Patrice Lumumba into the prime minister position in 1960, do you know that the Congo didn't have another national election until 2007? 47 years later, they didn't have that. Nothing was stable in the country. No schools, no hospitals, nothing for that entire period. So in 1964, making an honest attempt to address that, the Cuban people sent Ernesto Che Guevara over with African Cubans to fight on the side of the National Congolese movement in the Congo, the Patrice Lumumba's political organization. They fought there for several months. Che risked his own life. He was in the front of the battalion fighting, and they were not able to be successful. They were not able to turn back these CIA supported troops in the Congo. So Che went to Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and he stayed there in the Cuban embassy for several months, making contacts all throughout Africa because he was able to learn the situation in Africa with colonialism and anti-colonialism. And from that, Cuba was able to establish the Cuban African Command, which would help with anti-colonial fighting in Africa. And the man in the bottom picture, Victor Driki Cruz, was the commander of the Cuban African Command in Africa. Shakura got a chance to meet Brother Cruz when she went to Cuba in December. He's still alive and well. I've known this man since I was a teenager. I've studied his work in Africa, and I never got a chance to meet him. I'm just glad that she did. And I told her about him, but she probably didn't remember because it's just a name. Now she will definitely remember because she got a chance to meet this man. And he was a bodyguard of Che Guevara. The CIA killed Che Guevara in 1967 in Bolivia. He was doing the same thing in Bolivia that he did in the Congo, and they assassinated him there. They captured him alive and they assassinated him because they understood what the image of Che Guevara represented then and what it still represents today. They did nothing by killing the man. And he told them right before they killed him, you can kill the man, but you can't kill what the man represents. And he was certainly right because there's Che Guevaras everywhere by people who weren't even alive when he was alive. But Victor Driki Cruz, they played a critical role because as time went on, the picture in the middle, you see Cuban troops in Africa. What happened is that Africa was engaged in a vicious fight to stop the entire southern portion of Africa from becoming racist apartheid, like Azania, or what they call South Africa. South Africa, the government, along with the Portuguese in Angola and Mozambique, and along with these racist white mercenaries led by this man, Mike Moore, from Belgium, they were engaged in horrific acts in the image of Leopold, who killed millions in the Congo. You know about the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, as you should know about that. But you don't know anything about Belgium's Holocaust in the Congo, where 25 million people were killed in the Congo in a period of 25 years. You don't know anything about that. You didn't learn about that one. You didn't learn about the Germans perpetuating a Holocaust in Namibia, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed. We don't know anything about that. So what Cuba did is they sent up to 500,000 troops to Southern Africa to fight these racist forces that I just named. Portugal, South Africa, white mercenaries from Belgium. They sent US-backed all of these forces. Of course, the US backed them. Of course they did. When has the US ever been on the right side of history? I don't understand how y'all can even call yourselves American. You know, they just had a vote. Ghana made a resolution at the United Nations just a couple of months ago that the transatlantic slavery was the most horrific crime, a horrific crime in history. And they just wanted the United Nations to acknowledge just a resolution. They weren't asking for anything to happen, just to acknowledge that. And every country, and there's 198 countries in the United Nations, every country in the world voted in favor of that resolution from Ghana except three countries. And you can guess who they are: the United Snakes of America, Israel, of course, and Argentina, who's basically a puppet of the first two countries. So this is who the U.S. is. It's always been who they are. I mean, I'll never be an American because I don't want to. Especially, I travel overseas. People like, you an American? Nope, I'm an African in America. I didn't have any choice in that. So people laugh when I say that. I'm not aligning myself with you. Got to be insane. I don't want to have anything to do. Look, I'm fighting for justice here. Somebody asked me, well, why are you here? I'm like, because you've been stealing everything we got for 500 years. I'm here to get it back. That's why I'm here. Now say something about that before I make you take me to some of these resources so I can get them back. So 500,000 troops fought in Africa. Cuba lost an estimated 40,000 troops in Africa, this little small Caribbean island country of 11 million people, lost 40,000 people clear across the world in Africa. They did not receive any aid from Africa. There was no aid to give them. They did not receive any money. There was no money to give them. They went because they understood international solidarity. They understand that. That's why they went. So this is why we got to understand that. And now more examples of Cuban solidarity. Cuba has always supported African liberation struggles here in this country, in the US. They've always supported that. And they not only talked about supporting it, they demonstrated it. And the way they demonstrated it is despite the crippling economic blockade that has been carried out against them since 1962. When Robert Williams, the NAACP chair from Monroe, North Carolina, told Africans there that they needed to arm themselves against the Ku Klux Klan in 1957, he was set up by the local authorities and he had to flee for his life. And the first place he went was Socialist Cuba in 1962. And they welcomed him with open arms. They welcomed him. They let him do his radio program. And then eventually he went on to China and he stayed there until 1990, in the 1990s, where he eventually came back here. But were it not for Cuba's willingness to take him in, he would have certainly been, if not out now killed, but imprisoned. And Robert Williams, if you know who he is, he had a profound impact on later more militant movements like the Revolutionary Action Movement, the Republic of New Africa, and without question, the Black Panther Party. And speaking of the Black Panther Party, a number of Black Panther Party leaders found refuge in Cuba. Now, I'm not a fan of Eldridge Cleaver. I think that Eldridge Cleaver was confused and did a lot of damage within the Black Panther Party. But in 1968, he did flee here from charges that were brought against him that for things he was doing that shouldn't have happened. You should study that. Not going to talk about that here. But he went to Cuba in 1968. He acted a fool there because that's what Eldridge Cleaver typically did whenever and whatever he was involved in. And so they told him he had to leave. And he ended up going to Algeria, where he acted a fool there. And then he became a member of the Mormon church and came back here. There's a video of him speaking at the Mormon Tabernacle in Salt Lake City. So do with that what you will. But certainly Assata Shakur, who was broken out of prison in 1979, the Black Panther Party member and Black Liberation Army member and leader, went to Cuba, surfaced in Cuba in 1984 after being broken out of prison in 1979 in New York, and lived her life out in Cuba until her physical transition just a few short months ago in September of 2025 in Cuba. But because of the U.S. bounty against her, because they didn't want you to see Assata, they didn't want you to see her victory being free in Cuba, so they put a $2 million bounty on her head because they don't want you to have any belief that you can win against them. And by escaping, she won. I forgot to mention UEP Newton went to Cuba for 3 years, the co-founder and ideologue for the Black Panther Party. There's a picture of him on the screen there doing work in Havana. But getting back to Assata, Sister Assata, in 2014, Barack Obama opened talks with Cuba. And many of you, I know a lot of people, a lot of Africans love Barack Obama. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you the truth. You study it and confirm everything. And don't take my word for it. Confirm everything I'm telling you. Opened discussions with Cuba in 2014. And Cuba again has this vicious economic blockade against them. And Obama told Raul Castro, who's standing there to the right of Obama in the picture, that we will open up talks about the blockade if you return Assata Shakur to us. And of course, nobody could really blame the Cuban people if Raul had said, well, let's see if there's something we can work out. But the Cuban people are people of principle. Their revolution is a revolution of principle. I know living in the United States, we don't really understand that when I say that. But I'll tell you that Raul Castro is widely reported in the US media, so don't take my word for it. His words to Barack Obama is, that question, sir, is not on the table. That's what a principled person does. A principled person makes decisions that are the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. And Cuba has demonstrated without a shadow of a doubt their willingness to do that. That's why they're talking about indicting Raul Castro. You should be furious about this. I just showed you how much they've supported us. We haven't done a damn thing to support them, and they're trying to starve these people out. And we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs talking about what I'm going to eat tonight. We have got to do better, you all. We have got to stand up and say, hands off Cuba. Today, hands off Cuba. We have got to make this known everywhere. When there's actions talking about this, we need to be there. Come to African Liberation Day. We will be talking about this. Sign the petitions. Do the work. We have got to defend Cuba the way Cuba has defended us. And we have not had anybody who has defended us more than socialist Cuba. And that is a fact. And we just thank you for joining us today. We invite you to come back next week. We're not going to have a program next week because of African Liberation Day, but we do invite you to the upper left-hand corner. We'll be back in 2 weeks. But in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white QR code, you can find out, about programs. You can get the Forward Ever shop where you can buy clothing that is supporting the work that we do in Africa. If you're in Sacramento, we invite you again to come to our community self-defense class every Thursday, 6 to 8 at 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15. 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. You don't have to have any experience with martial arts. You don't have to have any experience with anything. You just have to have a desire, an open mind, and a willingness, and you can come. It's free of charge. You're welcome. Come to African Liberation Day, Saturday in Oakland at the East Side Arts Alliance, 2277 International. If you're old school like me, that's East 14th Street in East Oakland. Come there and donate to African Liberation Day. Because if you donate, it's not going towards our Oakland program or any of these programs here in the U.S. It's going towards all of the African Liberation Days we're organizing throughout Africa. So you can donate to Venmo, A-APRP, at A-APRP. Send whatever you can. Join the A-APRP. You can do that at aprp-intl.org. And then going to the right of the screen, if you're not able to attend African Liberation Day in person anywhere, if you want to know where to go see African Liberation Day, if you're not where we are, you can go to africanliberationday.net. No separations, all one thing. And from there, you can see the African Liberation Day in person closest to you. But if none of those things will work, if you're not mobile or whatever the situation is, you can go to our international webcast, which is Sunday, May 24th. And there's a QR code on the bottom of the flyer on the bottom right. Scan that QR code and you can register to attend that program. And Burkina Books, our comrade is here, who's one of the founders of the Thomas Sankara Center for Pan-African Unity in Burkina Faso and a cadre organizer in the A-APRP. And this is the program that they are bringing revolutionary literature to the Sahel region in Africa, to Burkina Faso, to Niger, and hopefully Mali at some point, and other nations. So help that. Become a monthly sponsor. Give what you can. whatever you can helps to buy these books. I've been a sponsor since they started and will continue for as long as it takes for us to get where we need to go. And the last is the QR code in the upper right is to buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8 US, $5 if you get it virtually. 100% of the proceeds go towards all of this work that we do, you all. All of this work that we do, the self-defense work, driving to African Liberation Day, taking food, taking supplies, all the stuff that we do, driving down this weekend, driving back and forth between San Jose and Oakland and driving back to Sacramento, all the stuff that we do, that comes from money that comes from you buying this book. It's a great organizing book. So buy it. If you've already bought it, call your library, get them to put it in there, buy it and put it in there. They'll do it if someone, I mean, I can't do everything, so I need help. So call them and do it. Call your bookstore, ask them to put it in there. It's only $8. They can buy 10 copies, sell them for $10. People are going to buy it. It's a good book. Don't take my word for it. When you scan the QR code, there are almost 70 reviews on it. I don't know those people. I wouldn't have time to get that many people to do something like that. So it's a good book, and they can put it in their bookstore and make a little money off of it, and it can help us do this work. So we look forward to seeing you at African Liberation Day this week. We are moving forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest